Welcome to this Tuesday discussion, the RCC Tuesday discussion. My name is Christoph Mauch, and I am very pleased to have as a discussant today Carolin Maertens, who's actually come from Oslo to us for just a few days, even though she's has been affiliated until recently with the Rachel Carson Center in a project that you're discussing the project or something else?
I discussed that project.
You discussed that project.
Thing that comes out of
wonderful. Okay, so Carolin is known to quite a few of you. What I find really interesting is she comes from the GDR. I mean, that's exotic for us. It's exotic,
achievement.
and it's important to mention it because she will talk about Eastern Germany. And when I grew up, the GDR was always a place where we wanted to be and to see what it's like, and we couldn't enter it.
Say those that haven't been.
But she doesn't just come from the GDR, but she comes from perhaps the most polluted part of the GDR, from very close to Bitterfeld, which is a place that you're focusing on. Bitterfeld is known, I know it through novels, but it's known to have a toxic landscape. But Carolin grew up in the provinces. Somehow away from Bitterfeld, I don't know which direction, probably west. West, it doesn't matter. Anyways, yes. She lived close to Bitterfeld, but when she was young, Bitterfeld was still a really bad polluting mine, but they would never drive on a trip, let's say a Sunday trip. They would never go to Bitterfeld because when you move towards Bitterfeld, it was kind of stinky and dirty, so they would move the other way, away from Bitterfeld. Everybody wanted to move away from Bitterfeld. And if you come from Bitterfeld or from the area, what do you want to become? And I learned from Carolin, she told me that she became a photographer. Actually, a product photographer, which means you take photos of still life.
Things, yeah.
Very exciting.
Also interior.
Still life. Yeah. And she could have been a photographer and not experienced all the great things that she's experienced since then, had she not gone on a vacation to Bosnia and Croatia and come to a place where there was a massacre had happened, probably a Muslim massacre.
It was in Srebrenica.
Srebrenica, yeah. And she was so shocked and realized she could not go back to taking photos of still life because there were other things happening in the world that put still life in perspective. And so she decided to become more political and study politics, except that when she studied politics at the FU, the Free University in Berlin, she realized that they are kind of probably boring, or the things that we're discussing were very abstract or structural about government systems. And so she at one point discovered, she moved to Tübingen and from Berlin to Tübingen and from Tübingen to Munich. She studied anthropology. I don't quite know how all this happened, but she ended up, instead of going to Pakistan where she wanted to go, I think it was too dangerous. She went to the other side of the border, where it was slightly less dangerous, but a little bit more like the GDR because it was because the post-Soviet Tajikistan, and so she did research, anthropological research in Tajikistan, and at one point, probably a really interesting story that I won't tell you. At one point, she discovered that the place where she had grown up, Bitterfeld, was known for its poison, arsenic, and she worked at that point in a project about remoteness, and Tajikistan was clearly remote, and Bitterfeld was maybe not as remote, but in a way it was too, and it was a project about tourism and landscapes, and what do you do with areas that are like left behind, economically left behind. What can you make of them, or if they are toxidized, that's not a word, but if they're polluted, what do you do with them? And you could start tourism in those areas. And I will stop here because, I will almost stop here because you will tell us exactly about this. But I just, in the door, I asked Carolin, because I like to ask people about fun fact, and I really like that. She said she owned a car. She was actually, for 6 years, she went back to, often for many months, to Tajikistan, from 2013 to 2019. And that was the only time when she owned a car in Tajikistan. And the car used to break down all the time. She even knows how to drive a car without a brake. And she's gone through many repairs. So if you want some advice about cars in Tajikistan, she can give you advice. But now I think we're really looking forward to learning more about the former GDR and landscapes and tourism and remoteness in Bitterfeld. Join me in welcoming Carolin Maertens.
Yeah, thank you so much, Christoph. That was a very kind introduction, and clearly my advice is don't buy a car in Tajikistan. This is not going to work. The project that Christoph was already introducing was part of a research project that I carried out in the past 2 years, roundabout. Was the Contours project that was based here at the RCC. It also had partner institution in other universities in Europe, in Estonia, in Finland, for example. We also had a Russian partner, but then the war happened and we had to sever the contacts with our Russian partners, unfortunately, for the most part. And within this Contours project, we looked into underprivileged sites that have gone through some kind of economic transformations often, and where things weren't going very well or very great, and the ants in those sites that have experienced some kind of economic decline have also seen, or were also kind of laboratory for rewilding projects, for renationalization. And that was often coupled with tourism, and tourism was then the standard answer to, how can we create some income sources? And that doesn't really work well everywhere, and it's not so smoothly how it's maybe perceived. So within that project, I happened to stumble again over, that's the website, sorry, that's the website. If you want to know more about the Contours project, you can look this up. I stumbled again about Bitterfeld. Was a coincidence because actually a colleague asked me about amber mining in Bitterfeld, and I was clear that no, there was never amber mined there, but then it turned out it actually was, so I became interested in that place where I grew up 30 kilometers away from. In fact, I never was there as a child. We did go to the other side where the wind wouldn't blow the fumes, but more to that. For me, the way I came to the field site, or I explored this, was really going there, and it was not too much preparation or conceptual package that I brought with me, apart from the larger Contours framework. So I walk you through this place and through its history. There are so many diverse strands to follow that I have to focus on a few, and I'm leaving out a lot. So this is not a coherent, for example, historical overview, but I'm happy to then pick this up in the discussion. Okay, let's start with the lake. With this one, it's called the Great Gotcha Lake, and sits on the shore, sits on the western side of Bitterfeld-Wolfen, which is a twin town in eastern Germany. The lake is about 1,300 hectares large. This is the location, just Germany, just to show you where it sits within Europe and Germany as a country. Bitterfeld-Wolfen itself has about 38,000 inhabitants, and the lake, as you could see, is surrounded by a number of villages, which are actually many centuries old, most of them. Some reforested areas. And today, because I will come to the history certainly, there's more to see. There is, for example, a nature reserve that is also about 1,300 hectares large. It's called the Gotche Wilderness, and it is administered by the environmental NGO Bund in Germany. There are bathing beaches, there's a waterfront with restaurants and playgrounds, there's a marina with sailing boats, and there are water sports facilities. Then there are also tourists invited to explore the natural idyll on a 65-kilometer bike lane. It goes around the lake and through the nature reserve, or to make themselves comfortable right on the edge of the nature reserve in modular fancy floating houses, which can be bought, but actually should be rented out. I come back to that later. Or you can also just be a bit more modest and pitch your tent on a camping site. The chemical park Bitterfeld-Wolfen hosts about 300 companies and offers about 12,000 jobs to the wider region. And a new investor tries these days, since 1.5 years, to revitalize the solar cell production nearby Bitterfeld, which was always already a part of the chemical industrial park. So this entrepreneurial effort towards a post-carbon future was unthinkable just 30 years ago in a region that was profoundly shaped and made by more than 100 years of open-cast lignite mining and the chemical industry that developed in proximity to it. So 30 years ago, the Gotche Lake that I showed you before looked like this. And it is the residual pit of the Great Gotche mine, so it's the mine of the same name, which was flooded in 98 up to 2002. The Gotche mine itself, with about 3,600 hectares, was the largest mine pit of the larger area of the Bitterfeld coalfield. This is how it's called, which in itself is part of the Middle German brown coal field. So it's an entire area that today consists of lake that are restored mines. In order to understand a bit the transformations that this place has gone through, what already Christoph mentioned with pollution and fumes and these things, I want to briefly talk about give you some aspects about the history of mining and the chemical industry as it developed. It was actually only until first in the middle of the 19th century, with the integration of that region into the wider railway network, that mining would start, that exploration, more invested in exploration would start, because then the coal could actually be transported to markets at cost-efficient prices. And that in itself presented incentives for industries, for energy-intensive industries to flock to the region, and that was in the 1890s, electrochemical plants that would come to Bitterfeld for exactly that reason. And one of the very popular or famous or well-known plants was Aqua in 1900. Was Aqua in 1909, setting up the so-called film factory, which was a production site for photochemical materials, for photofilm and photographic paper. And in 1936, as it was also a research unit, they developed the first workable color film in the world. That was actually used by private consumers. In the 1920s, Aqua became the second largest producer in the world of photographic films and paper, and extended its production line. Also including the production of chemical fibers such as rayon, it's also called viscose. Viscose is made from cellulose, which is extracted again from wood through a highly toxic procedure. The whole, I just showed you this, or gave you this example of the Aqua company to show how these things slowly developed, and always in conjunction with the supply of coal, which was nearby. So the more the industries expanded, the more demand of coal was there, obviously. This demanded also more processing of coal, which led to the construction of power plants. as you see in that picture, which is one that was actually just taken down in the 90s. And what this picture also shows is a high level of pollution, and not only the obvious or visible air pollution. Already those first industrial plants that came in the 1890s dumped their toxic waste in abandoned mine pits that were not prepared for that. So, or whatever waste, toxic waste they had, it would just sink as a leak into the ground, in the soil, into groundwater. I fast forward now to the post Second World War time, where Bitterfeld-Wolfen found itself in the Soviet occupation zone, and thus became the third largest chemical production site in the German Democratic Republic. Again, that also was accompanied by further exploration and expansion of mining. And this actually was the foundation of the mine that I showed you before, the Gotcha mine, which was explored and opened up in 1949 and operated until 1991. In the GDR economy, it was mostly coal that the industry ran on, and as well as private consumption in homes. The alternative, using oil, there was a short endeavor, but with the oil crisis in the 70s, that door was closed, and the state would shift back heavily to mining. The state, to win also foreign currency, pushed for the ever increase of the production of chemicals that could also be sent in foreign markets on the cost of health and the environment. Just to give you some numbers, the chemical plants in Bitterfeld and Wolfen diversified and produced at the peak time 4,500 different products. It employed 32,000 people. At that time, it was about 70,000 inhabitants. So there were also many people coming in from other places. And the range of products was very impressive. They produced, for example, just the categories of it: anorganic and organic, basic chemicals, pesticides, dyes, catalysts, ion exchanger, molecular sieves, silicones, sodium carbonate, and so on and so on. What you can understand from those names is that these are substances whose manufacturing also produces highly toxic byproducts. And now the GDR was actually very progressive in terms of formal regulations regarding environmental protection, the handling of toxic waste and pollutants and so on, just that they wouldn't implement it for a number of reasons. We will come back to that too. The consequences of that were grave, because Bitterfeld, as you already heard, was one of the most polluted areas or regions in Europe at that time, in the 80s for sure. The nearby rivers were so polluted that they would be basically declared dead in terms of any species or organism living in there. There are high levels of pulmonary diseases, especially in young children, and chronic skin diseases that were caused by all the fumes. To such extent that children, that's just a little mark, that children would be sent for holidays to families that would live in areas where there was clean air. Within East Germany, Bitterfeld was obviously famously known for its extreme air pollution and bad smells. Bad smells came also from nitric acid. It's very stinky. It was well known within Germany, but it was also brought to the attention of the West German audience through the publication of the book Flight of Ashes, written by the East German journalist Monika Maron. And that book is based on a journey that she undertook in 1974 to Bitterfeld. She was sent by Weekly Daily. To report or to write about the development of the chemical triangle. And of course she was supposed to write a triumphal, glorifying picture of the working class in the factories, fueling the industry and the country and the nation and so on. She came back with a very critical report that was censored and not exactly published. And she was very frustrated about it, and decided to write about her experiences in form of a fiction, of an autobiographical novel that was published in 1981 with a West German publisher. So it wasn't published in East Germany, but she got copies, and so the story goes, she brought it. She was given those and distributed them in East Germany as well. That is the book, and here's a quote from that, describing the air pollution through the words of her alter ego in the book, who's also a female journalist. And she says, these fumes could serve as road signs. Please go straight ahead to the ammonia, then turn left at the nitric acid. When you feel a stabbing pain in your throat and bronchial tubes, turn around and call a doctor. That was sulfur dioxide. From anecdotes from older or elderly people that I talked to in Bitterfeld, many of those would exactly have those memories of calling that, oh my God, my eyes are starting to produce tears. That was like, oh, they released some chlorine gas, which they did from time to time to release the pressure. So some things. Or there was a certain, the wind would take a certain direction, so they would call like, yeah, okay, now the ash, that's the name of the book, a flight of ashes, then a huge cloud of ash would just go in a certain direction in some villages. Now, people were not just accepting this, but were issuing protests and petitions, but to no avail. And there is a whole collection of secret police documents, or Stasi-Unterlagen, that show this very well, how people have been complaining, have been filing petitions and so on. It wasn't just Bitterfeld, there were many Bitterfelds in East Germany, and the dissatisfaction with the conditions that grew, and also the sense of criticism, and the non-response on the part of the state that would respond, if at all, with persecution of people that were too outspoken about these things. Or it was blunt denial of environmental problems in East Germany. So in the mid-80s, also parallel to what happened in West Germany, the critique and protest grew louder, and the environmental movement became more organized, became more of a movement in East Germany. So there were initiatives to centralize projects or more local initiatives. And one of them is the so-called Green Ecological Network, ARC, das Grün-ökologische Netzwerk Arche, under the aegis of the Protestant Church, that was founded in 1988. And one of the projects they did was producing clandestinely a documentary movie in Bitterfeld on the 25th of June in 88, which was the day of the European Championships final between Netherlands and the Soviet Union, which meant nobody was on the street. Even the street police or the secret police were set to watch the games, which were broadcasted by Western TV, by the way, the Western TV channel. So it was a collaboration between a local from Bitterfeld, who was employed at the chemical combine, two West German journalists, and two activists, representatives of the environmental protection network from Berlin. And the operation itself reads really like an agent secret police endeavor. However, they managed to produce this material and to document the pollution and contamination and the illegal dumping of toxic waste in and around Bitterfeld. That movie was screened in autumn in 1988 on West German TV before it was circulated among those oppositional movement circuits within East Germany. We go quick.
Ausschnitte eines Films über die Umweltzerstörungen in einer Industrieregion im Süden der DDR. Sein Titel: Bitteres aus Bitterfeld. Hergestellt vom Grünen Netzwerk Arche einem Zusammenschluss mehrerer DDR-Umweltgruppen. Die Kreisstadt Bitterfeld liegt im Zentrum der Kohle- und Chemieindustrie des Bezirkes Halle. In der Umgebung dieser Wohnungen produzieren die Werke mehr als 2000 unterschiedliche chemische Stoffe, meist auf überalterten Anlagen.
Es ist so, dass die DDR-Regierung jahrzehntelang ihrer Bevölkerung über den Zustand der Umwelt im Unklaren bzw. regelrecht getäuscht hat. In der DDR-Presse gab es keine Verlautbarung dazu über den wahren Zustand von Luft, Wasser, Wald und so weiter. Die Arche als grünes Netzwerk, als ein Zusammenschluss von Ökologiegruppen landesweit in der evangelischen Kirche, stellt sich die Aufgabe, diese Umweltprobleme, ja Umweltskandale, beim Namen zu nennen und Öffentlichkeit herzustellen. Dazu ist dieser Film über Bitterfeld ein erster Anfang. Bitterfeld ist deshalb vor allen Dingen gewählt worden, weil dort die ökologischen Probleme äußerst gravierend sind.
Diese Mondlandschaft ist im Laufe von vielen Jahren entstanden. Bis 90 Meter tief wird nach Kohle gesucht. 2/3 der Landschaft um Bitterfeld sind in bestimmten Gegenden so aufgewühlt. Ausgekohlte Tagebaue werden seit Anfang dieses Jahrhunderts als Müllkippen benutzt. Es ist gar nicht mehr nachzuvollziehen, was wo vergraben wurde. Erdreich, Kalk, Asche mit Wasser versetzt, wurden schichtweise auf die chemischen Abfälle aufgetragen. So lagen irgendwo in den Tiefen die Altlasten des Zweiten Weltkrieges, die Versuchsproben der Kampfstoffe und andere Fehlproduktionen der Wissenschaft.
Hier unter der vertrockneten Decke einer Wasser-Asche-Mischung schlummern Gifte aus der Familie der halogenierten Kohlewasserstoffe. Sie sind Zwischenprodukte für Kunststoffe, Lösungsmittel, Schädlingsbekämpfungsmittel, Pharmazeutika, Treibgas, Feuerlöschermittel und so weiter und so weiter. Zur selben chemischen Gruppe gehören auch die chlorierten Kohlewasserstoffe, deren eines Endprodukt das unrühmlich bekannte Insektizid DDT ist.
Wie für die Gefährdung von Bitterfeldern ist der zentrale Getreidespeicher für diese Region, der sich unmittelbar neben einer Chloranlage befindet. Also inmitten der Chemieindustrie wartet das Getreide auf die Weiterverarbeitung zu Brot und Kuchen. In einem Wassergutachten des grünen Netzwerkes konnte festgestellt werden, dass das Bitterfelder Chemiekombinat häufig gegen die Einleitung gegen die Normwerte, gegen die bestehenden Normwerte verstößt und dass das Abwasser zur schlechtesten Abwasserkategorie gehört. Man kann vermuten, dass auch das Trinkwasser der Bitterfelder von diesen Belastungen nicht unbeschadet ist und man weiß bis heute nichts darüber, welche Langzeitauswirkungen diese gravierenden Probleme auf die Einwohner in Bitterfeld hat.
So this movie is freely available on YouTube. I'm happy to share the link if you would like to continue watching this. The long-term effects of that pollution and contamination was first, and the publication of that or the screening of that movie in a very popular West German TV show was first that there was a huge outcry and about the scandal of the condition in the GDR, and it was seen that, or it was judged or perceived as the disclosure of the ultimate failure of the socialist system as well, and hands-on Bitterfeld became synonymous with that failure, with ultimate recklessness vis-a-vis the environment and human health, but also more than human health. I fast forward now to, well, it's not that fast actually, to the reunification in 89 and 90, when most of those polluting and extremely dangerous plants were shut down immediately. So, for example, the the plant or the site that was producing the chemical fibers that I showed earlier with the cellulose production. The highly contaminated waste sites were cleaned up as far as that was possible. Sometimes they were also just covered to prevent gases to further leak. And the restoration of the mining landscape went through a very interesting process. I just tried to make this, to sum this up now, to make it a bit shorter, which is, it was not just about to remediate the former mine or mining landscape, but it became also an exercise in demonstrating for political reason the possibility of successful transformation, not just of that very disturbed area, but also of the East Germans as such. So mine restoration in Bitterfeld and the cleanup of those toxic sites meant the possibility of East Germany to actually leave behind that burden of the socialist time and move towards a glorious capitalistic market society, which they did. Just it came at the cost of a lot of unemployment and many problems. The result, though, of the remediation that we have seen, there's one scene from the movie, is what I showed you earlier with the lake and all this tourism infrastructure. Just there, this is not where the story ends. And one is that a huge reservoir of highly contaminated groundwater sits still under the Twin Town, and you will see this now. The dark violet, rosa, and red parts are so highly contaminated that they are just enclosed. So there are there are like wells drilled along a certain line to prevent this, to move the groundwater to move towards the river, which you see in the right upper corner. And there is no way to clean this up, so the state is that just let's try to keep the groundwater where it is, and let's hope that there's not going to be any flooding from the nearby lake. This is an extremely expensive endeavor, and also the restoration, I have to say before, was paid by public money. Now, what happened with this is one of those drill wellheads that are there to monitor the groundwater. What else happened is private investors were sought, and they came. And what happened to the shore, which was by contract actually set to always have to be accessible by the general public, became privatized in many parts. So the lake was bought, as well as large parts of the shore, by a private investor, under the condition that they would develop tourism infrastructure with the hope that that would bring revenues, tax revenues for the districts and the villages and so on. Just that those holiday homes have somehow turned into permanent residencies without paying taxes, obviously, for that. And that particular site that you see here sits between the village that has been there like for hundreds and hundreds of years, and people were very happy once the lake was there instead of this dust bowl. And then this investor came and put the houses right in front of them, blocking the access to the shore, because actually the road is private, so there's like a barrier. You can't open it if you don't have the key, if you don't have a house. It was a big scandal because the lake was also sold for 3 million euro. It was restored for 350 million euro, plus ongoing costs for keeping the toxic water where it is. And just in December last year, so a month ago, the city council decided to look into this again and to withdraw from the contract, which is a very interesting case now, if that happens. So, that's it.